Good morning. This hearing will now come to order. Welcome to today's hearing called Caught by Surprise, Causes and Consequences of the Helium-3 Supply Crisis. 5 months ago, this committee held a hearing that examined technical problems in the development of the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, DNDO's new generation of radiation portal monitors called Advanced Spectroscopic Portals, or mercifully ASPs. Among the issues that the subcommittee had expressed an interest in, or we had heard about as a potential problem, was the effect of a reported shortage of helium-3 and whether that was affecting the ASP program or might affect it. And at that hearing, Dr. Bill Hagan, the acting director of DNDO, who is with us again today, testified that because of the shortage of helium-3, that the White House 2 months earlier had barred DNDO from using helium-3 in radiation portal monitors. We would have liked to have known that before the hearing, but we found out about it in the testimony at the hearing, not the prepared testimony submitted in advance, but actually in the oral testimony at the hearing. It was a surprise to us. Also, the principal contractor, the prime contractor, Raytheon, had a witness here who also was learning about it in the oral testimony at the hearing. We have since learned that both the Department of Energy and the Department of Homeland Security should have known several years ago that it would be a disaster to rely on radiation-based equipment that used helium-3 technology. Helium-3 is a byproduct of tritium, and tritium's only purpose is to enhance the capability of nuclear weapons. Until recently, no tritium has been produced in this country since 1988, and the reduction in our stockpile of nuclear weapons guaranteed a reduction in the stockpile of tritium and therefore helium-3. At the same time, or after 9/11, the demand for helium-3 grew exponentially because of the use in radiation detection devices. DOE not only produces and sells helium-3, but is one of the largest consumers through the megaports and second line of defense programs and the spallation neutron source at Oak Ridge. DOE never warned anyone that there was a long-term supply, that there was no long-term supply for all of those uses, and that everyone who used or counted on helium-3 should begin to make other plans, look for alternatives. In 2006, there was only 150,000 liters left in the stockpile, and DOE told Homeland Security that there was enough for 120,000 liters needed for the first phase of the ASP program. The result was that in mid-2008, when commercial vendors began to warn of a helium-3 shortage, DHS didn't appear to take it seriously. It took several more months before there was a government-wide acknowledgement of the severity of the problem. The effects of the helium-3 shortage are real and painful, and not just for radiation detection. Helium-3 also plays a crucial role in oil and gas exploration and cryogenics, including low-temperature physics, quantum computing, neutron scattering facilities, and medical lung imaging research. Important science is on hold in a wide variety of fields, and commercial opportunities for American firms have been lost. Over the last year, the cost of obtaining helium-3 has risen from around $200 per liter to more than $2,000 per liter. For many applications, there are potential alternatives for some work, particularly the cryogenics. There is no known alternative for helium-3. So today we will examine the causes and the consequences of the helium-3 supply crisis with an eye to learn lessons to guide future resource management. We also want to hear about what we are now doing to manage the limited supply of helium-3, to set priorities for access to that stockpile, and the search for alternative sources and alternative gases. I understand the allocations for 2010 have been determined. The gas is being processed and will soon be distributed. Looking back, it is clear that the shortage was inevitable. If DOE had noticed a disconnect between supply and demand, they could have managed the stockpile with clear priorities that would have allocated it to the most important, most essential uses, and led to an aggressive and timely search for alternatives. that might have helped avoid the crisis or mitigate the crisis. Why did DOE not see this coming? DNDO, and also why did DNDO not validate, ascertain that there was enough Helium-3 for the ASP program? A cautious and reasonable analysis should have sought a complete accounting from DOE before wagering years of effort, of research, and hundreds of millions of dollars into a technology that depended upon a gas that would not be available. The current efforts of DNDO, DOE, and DOD and other agencies working with the National Security Council staff does appear to be very well organized. Although there are many failures to get to this point, it does appear that all the relevant agencies are doing well now. They are identifying alternatives. They are trying to identify other sources, international sources of Helium-3. And it really is a model, as I understand it, for interagency management, crisis management. But the best crisis management is not to have a crisis. And I hope that DOE has learned, and other agencies will learn from this and lead to wiser management of the unique isotopes that they control and distribute. Finally, we were mildly annoyed to learn that the technology that we had been investigating for some time was not going to be used, to learn that in oral testimony. We're also at least mildly annoyed that we've not gotten the documents that we have asked for. The agencies appear to be going through some extraordinary courtesies to each other of letting everybody review everybody else's documents, and there is no legal basis for that. And it may be a courtesy by each agency to the other, but it is discourteous to us. It makes it very difficult for us to do our job. We are not as well prepared today for this hearing as we would like to be and should have been, had the documents that we requested in a timely way been provided in a timely way. And I certainly took the last administration to task for their failures in that area, and I intend to take this administration to task as well. We are leaving, in consultation with Dr. Brown, we are leaving the record of this hearing open today to add additional documents that we receive, a tardy production of documents. And it's very possible that there are questions that we should have asked had we had those documents, that there will be another hearing. It's not convenient for us either. I am attaching, for the record, 2 letters sent to the subcommittee on the subject. One is from an oil and gas industry representative, and one is from a researcher at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab. The chair now recognizes our ranking member from Georgia, Dr. Brown, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me welcome our witnesses here today and thank y'all for attending. I wish I could say that I was glad that we're holding this hearing, but unfortunately I'm not. During the hearing last fall, as the chairman has already mentioned, the hearing was on the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office's ASP program, Advanced Spectroscopic Portal Program. This subcommittee was notified of the state of the nation's helium-3 supply and the shortfalls effects on our national security, particularly in nuclear detection. This by itself was a troubling revelation, but the impact of insufficient helium-3 supplies is not limited to the national security sector. Medical treatments, oil and gas exploration, cryogenics, and other research endeavors have all come to depend upon helium-3 because of its historical abundance as a byproduct of our nuclear weapons program. For years, helium-3 was a cheap and plentiful resource that was ideal for many applications because of its intrinsic properties. Until only recently, the U.S. was continually building up its stockpile, but a number of issues combined to change that trend. The breakdown of our nation's nuclear weapons stockpile after the Cold War, the increased priority on domestic nuclear detection brought about by September 11, 2001, the demand created by neutron scattering facilities and Russia's decision to cease exports all combined to create the perfect storm for helium-3. DHS, DOD initiated processes to limit demand, ration existing supplies, and find alternatives. But these actions were after the fact. As this committee has seen before with rare earth elements, medical isotopes, and plutonium-238, mitigation efforts were taken after the crisis has already emerged. In the future, the federal government needs to do a better job of projecting both the demand for isotopes in its control and its own needs of those isotopes and elements that are not. This becomes even more important with the President's recent nuclear arms reduction pact with Russia. I look forward to working with the Chairman to ensure that the federal government does a better job of predicting and mitigating these supply shortages. I congratulate the Chairman on his efforts to help do just that. To this end, I hope that the agencies assist this committee in meeting its oversight responsibilities in a more cooperative fashion. To date, the documents provided to this committee in response to the Chairman's request contained unexplained redactions. It is also my understanding that not all documents have been provided. In order for this committee to do its work, the agencies and the administration need to either provide the documents requested or claim a legally recognized privilege so that we can move forward. I hope we'll see some radical changes in that issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. All additional opening statements or any additional opening statements submitted by members will be included in the record. Without objection now, I would enter a packet of documents into the record. The majority of those materials were drawn from the documents produced by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Energy in response to the request, this subcommittee's request of March 8, 2010. As is our common practice, those materials were shared between the majority and minority staffs before the hearing. I am now pleased to introduce our witnesses today. Dr. William Hagan is currently the Acting Director of the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, DNDO, at the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. William Brinkman is the Director of the Office of Science at the Department of Energy and has been in his position at DOE since 2009. As our witnesses should know, you each will have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. When you have all completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions, and each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. It is our practice to receive testimony under oath. Do any of you have any objection to taking an oath? The record should reflect that all the witnesses nodded their head that they did not. You also have the right to be represented by counsel. Do any of you have counsel here? And the record should reflect that all the witnesses nodded their head that they did not have counsel present. If you'd all please now stand and raise your right hand. Oh, you're, well.
He's counsel.
All right. Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay, thank you. Dr. Aoki's not actually with us.
Ask Dr. Brinkman to explain who's accompanying him today.
What's that? Yes. Dr. Brinkman, could you introduce Dr. Aoki just quickly? So.
Mike.
I'm sorry.
Put on your microphone, please.
This is Dr. Stephen Aoki, who is from the NNSA, part of the DOE, and I want him to be here to represent his half if it needed questions.
Okay, well, he's just taken the oath, so not only will what you tell us be under oath, but what he tells you will be under oath as well. You should do that with your staff all the time. I should try it with mine.
Don't trust your staff.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that we allow Mr. Rohrbach to sit in on this hearing. To ask questions.
Without objection. Okay, the record should reflect that all the witnesses and the witnesses' helpers have taken the oath, and we will start with Dr. Hagan. Dr. Hagan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of DNDO, I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to discuss the helium-3 supply. My testimony today will address the following points. What was done at the beginning of the Advanced Spectroscopic Portal program to ensure there was adequate supply of helium-3, how we became aware of the shortage of helium-3, how we responded to it, the impact of the shortage on DNDO's programs, and the status of the work to identify alternative neutron detection technologies. In the past, helium-3 was a relatively low-cost commodity, and its use has increased greatly in recent years. This increased demand was driven largely by the expanded use of large radiation portal monitors that are being deployed around the world. An RPM consists of a neutron detector using helium-3 gas in tubes and a gamma detector using a plastic scintillator. In addition, helium-3 is used in scientific research and medical and industrial applications. Unfortunately, as the demand was rising, the supply was declining. The current and future helium-3 supply will fail to satisfy the demand of interagency partners and the commercial sector. In February 2006, as DNDO was planning for the Advanced Spectroscopic Program, program staff contacted DOE to ensure adequate supplies of helium-3 for up to 1,500 systems over 5 years. At that time, there was no indication that the supply of helium-3 would be problematic. Similarly, vendor responses to the ASP request for proposals showed no concerns over the availability of helium-3 to meet manufacturing needs. DNDO first became aware of the potential problem with helium-3 supply in the summer of 2008. However, it was unclear whether the problem was a result of delays in the supply chain or an actual shortage of helium-3. In the fall of 2008, DOE issued a report verifying the existence and seriousness of the overall supply shortfall. In February of 2009, DNDO took the lead in forming an interagency helium-3 integrated product team, or IPT, with participation of major users of helium-3 for neutron detection applications. The IPT aimed to assess the true impact of the shortage and to ensure that the most critical government and commercial programs would receive helium-3. DNDO had simultaneously begun negotiations in January 2009 to secure helium-3 for its programs. The sale was finalized in June, but 1 month later, DNDO ceded control of the helium-3 to be allocated in accordance with interagency determinations. Further, in September, DNDO ceased to make any new allocations of helium-3 for RPMs. Based on current funding and guidance, however, the helium-3 shortage has had no appreciable short-term impact on the deployment of RPMs. The program has a sufficient inventory of systems to support deployments through 2011. Additionally, a number of technical and management solutions are further reducing potential impacts. For instance, if ASP units are certified, the helium-3 from the existing RPMs that are being replaced can be reused in the ASP units. Devices that utilize smaller volumes of helium-3, such as handhelds and backpacks, may also be impacted by the shortage. To mitigate the impact, industry has been purchasing helium-3 from other sources and recycling gas from obsolete equipment. However, a redesign of current equipment to utilize new neutron technologies will eventually be necessary, and DNDO plans to work with industry to catalyze this development. DNDO will also request modest allocations from the government stockpile to continue deployment of these systems until alternatives are available. DNDO has been funding programs to identify alternative neutron detection technologies for several years. However, because helium-3 was widely available until only recently, alternatives are still somewhat early in their development. DNDO is working with the commercial sector to identify technologies that have potential for near-term commercialization and recently tested several available alternatives. DNDO has also accelerated exploratory research projects to identify other potential materials suitable for neutron detection. I have brought a few examples here on the table today if you'd like to discuss later. My testimony has outlined the course of action DNDO took to initially ensure the availability of helium-3, when we became aware of the shortage, the steps we took in response, the impacts of the shortage, and the alternative technologies under development. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the subcommittee, I thank you for your attention and will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Dr. Brinkman, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and provide testimony on the DOE's action in response to the national helium-3 shortage. Within the DOE, both NASA, NNSA and the Office of Science play a role in helium-3 production. NNSA provides the helium-3 supply, and the isotope program, now within the Office of Science, distributes helium-3 from NNSA to the marketplace. Even before the DOE Office of Science assumed responsibility for the isotope program in fiscal year 2009, we undertook measures to educate the various communities of users, including national security, medical, industrial, and research communities of isotope shortages in general. Our Office of Nuclear Physics, within the Office of Science, organized a major workshop in August 2008. The purpose of this workshop was to identify critical isotopes for the nation that are in short supply. Following this workshop, the community of users became aware of the imminent shortage of helium-3, and the DOE began coordinating future allocations of helium-3 with other agencies. We and others in the government have reinforced this message through presentations at major scientific societies, including the American Association of Advancement of Science, for example. Since assuming responsibility for the isotope program about 1 year ago, the Office of Science has worked very closely with NNSA and other federal agencies to develop a coordinated response. In March 2009, we joined NNSA, DOD, DHS to form an interagency group with the purpose of identifying demand, supply, and R&D options for the future. Since July 2009, this interagency effort has been under the auspices of an official interagency policy committee formed by the White House National Security staff. Our approach has been straightforward. We have reached out to the various communities that use helium-3 and asked them to refine their needs in the light of the shortage so that we can allocate resources as rationally as possible across various sectors. We also identified portal monitors as a vital but disproportionate source of demand for helium-3 and recognized the need for alternative detection technologies. These alternative detectors, although not quite as good as helium-3, will enable us to support these applications without the use of helium-3 and will provide our country with a strong nuclear detection program. We are cautiously optimistic that alternative detection approaches can be evaluated and put into production in the next few years, avoiding major disruption of the planned deployment of portal monitors, as seen by the evidence on the table here. We worked hard to develop accurate needs for other communities that use helium-3, cryogenic research, lung imaging, and other communities, and found that with recycling the helium-3, we could further reduce the demand. The guidance developed by the IPC for allocation of available helium-3 supply assigns high priority to scientific applications that depend on the unique physical properties of the isotope. Working on the supply side, we have developed a plan that will allow us to keep in balance the supply and demand for the next 5 to 6 years. To do this, we need to increase our supply by one of two approaches. The first would be to use helium-3 that results from heavy water reactors that exist around the world, but particularly in Canada. The second would be to produce commercial tritium using the current infrastructure, but separately from the weapons program, and harvest the helium-3 from tritium decays. We are currently getting cost estimates, etc., for these two approaches. If we can capture the helium-3 from Canada, we believe that we have a balanced program over the next 5 to 6 years. Another possibility is extracting helium-3 from helium sources such as natural gas deposits. Since the fraction of helium-3 captured from natural gas wells is only 200 parts per billion, a further study is needed to determine whether this approach can be cost competitive. We believe we have organized a well-defined, proactive interagency approach to meeting this challenge and mitigating its impact to the extent possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brinkman. We will now begin with our first round of questions, and the chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes. Dr. Brinkman, I know that you joined DOE in 2009, so the obvious criticisms don't apply to you personally. I know that you probably don't want to be harshly critical publicly of the people who now work for you, but it does seem obvious, with benefit of hindsight, that this was coming, and that DOE not only is the only domestic source for Helium-3, but as a major consumer of Helium-3, should obviously have known that there was what the demand was and what the supply was, and seen this coming. And even apparently DHS, we might fault them for not being more aggressive about assuring that there was a sufficient supply. Apparently did inquire, and DOE said no problem. How did that happen?
As you point out, I wasn't around to witness that happen. The only thing I can say is that at the time, the Russians were putting a lot of Helium-3 onto the market, as well as the DOE, and I think that confused the picture somewhat as to what was actually going on in the marketplace. And it was only about 2008 when people started to really realize what was happening, and then the Russian source dried up. And so there was a sequence of events that had happened there that I don't want to defend the situation, because it is unfortunate that this wasn't recognized earlier, but there was a sequence of events there that led to some confusion.
You mentioned earlier that you've now had a conference on isotopes, rare isotopes. Although it doesn't, I know that Helium-3 was discussed at that. It doesn't appear that the participants in the conference came away with a oh crap kind of feeling about it. There was an understanding that there was, some shortage, but not quite the crisis. What are you all doing now to identify whether there are other isotopes that may have a supply that or demand that greatly exceeds the supply, and that we aren't developing technologies that will depend upon a material that's not there?
Well, first of all, the program has been moved to the Office of the Nuclear Physics Office rather than the Nuclear Energy Office. The Nuclear Energy Organization is really interested in reactors, not isotopes. However, the Nuclear Physics Organization is an organization which is very much interested in isotopes, rare isotopes of various types, to learn more about nuclear physics and nuclear structure, and so it has a much bigger presence and interest in the isotope in isotope development, and it now of course manages all of our isotope development at various that we do internally, and so it is responsible for exactly what you're asking for, where we come, where things will go wrong. We of course have had another crisis, as you know, in Molly 99, and it was mediated again by an interagency office, and we're working at looking at very carefully at for future ways of generating that particular isotope, and have made progress on how to do that commercially.
Chair now recognizes Dr. Brown for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Coming back to Dr. Brinkman, you mentioned Molly 99 is a problem. Helium-3, obviously, from this hearing is a problem. How about other isotopes? Have have you identified other isotopes that are susceptible to similar shortages? And if so, what other technology should we be utilizing to seek alternatives to those isotopes?
Those are the only two known to me that we have to worry about. But we certainly have gone through. We have a report in which we've gone through all the different isotopes that are used commercially and looked to see whether they are in short supply, and what we need to do to supply them. So we have a full report on that, and we've gone through all of them. These two are the ones I know have created crises anyway. I don't believe we're in trouble on any others.
Are you continuing an inventory on an ongoing basis of those, just make sure that we do not have a repeat of what we're having on Helium-3?
We'll sure try to.
I certainly hope so. Dr. Brinkman, part of the reason we found ourselves in the current situation is the drawdown of nuclear weapons after the Cold War. What impact will the recently signed nuclear agreement with Russia have on Helium-3 supplies?
It's bound to reduce them further because the weapons program will eventually draw down the tritium supply that they need, and so we really will have to find alternative sources, and that's what we're working on right now.
Okay. What other isotopes are potentially impacted by that?
I don't think there's any other isotopes impacted by the production of tritium, which is what you have to produce to make helium-3.
All right, sir. Are we the only nation that provides helium-3 for IAEA monitors?
Presently, that's true.
Is the U.S. bound by international agreements to supply helium-3 to the IAEA?
He'll answer that.
Well, the U.S. is not bound by international agreement, but traditionally we have been the primary source of supply for the IAEA nuclear safeguards program. One of the things that we have done has been, as the magnitude of the problem has become clear, we have encouraged the IAEA to actually pursue supply from other countries. In particular, Russia would be one place they could go look, possibly some other countries. But we have really made sure that the IAEA is aware that we are probably not going to be in the position that we have been in the past to be the primary source of supply or the sole source of supply for this material.
Okay, very good. Dr. Hagan, after helium-3 alternatives are developed for neutron detection, do you believe that further testing will need to be done at the Nevada test site to verify the system?
You're talking about alternatives to helium-3?
Yes, sir.
Yes. I would think that we would do that. We're testing we've tested some systems already at Los Alamos using relevant sources. With the type of, some of these detectors, you can test them without having to actually use special nuclear material. You can use other sources of neutrons. So it kind of depends on the particular technology. But if it's appropriate, and we would certainly do that.
And that will be an ongoing basis?
Oh yeah.
Okay, very good. How about the cost and schedule and impacts on that?
The cost of testing or cost of development of?
All of it.
Well, I've got 47 seconds. Okay.
Yes, sir. No, I have 47 seconds.
Yeah, okay,
so
fair enough.
You can take
what you
Good point. All right. The costing varies, of course, with each technology. So we have some that are more near term than others. Some are longer term. And so I can't really give you an answer for all that. We have approximately within DNDO, and there are other projects going on elsewhere in the government, but within DNDO we have some 24 projects to develop alternatives. On the average, I would say those are probably $1 million a year. No, that's probably too high. $500,000 a year, in that range for the development. The testing, as I said, would depend on what type of sources we would need. If we could get by with a so-called Californium source to test for thermal neutron detectors, that could be done relatively cheaply and quickly. If we have to go to NTS or places where there's special nuclear material, that's very expensive. That's multi-millions of dollars and many months.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, Chair recognizes Ms. Dowkin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Brinkman, how much money is the DOE spending to support the work being done by DNDO for looking at substitutes or other areas of research?
Well, I don't know that we're spending so much money on this. We are, of course, interested in alternative detectors, too. Mm-hmm. And we have this second line of defense. But I don't know the amount that Second Line of Defense program is spending on alternative detectors at this time. I just don't know that number. But that's one of the places where we're spending money. In addition, one of the major users of helium-3 has been our neutron scattering and neutron experimental program at SNS at Oak Ridge. There we see some very big numbers that were needed, but there's now an international community of people to do those kind of experiments, and they're looking at alternative detectors too. So there's a fair bit of activity on the alternative detector in a very broad base of work.
Yeah. So you don't have any idea what you're spending? I mean, can you get back to me on that? Or?
Yeah, we could get back to you on that, but I think Steve will have an answer to that on the NSA side.
Yeah, there is a research and development program within the National Nuclear Security Administration that includes funding for nuclear detector development, and which has now prioritized the identification of new neutron detection technologies that would provide a substitute for helium-3. And I think I was told this morning that it's something like $7 million a year, but I would want to confirm that and get back to you.
If you could confirm that and get back to me. And so as you make that a priority, what happens to funding for other pieces within that?
Well, clearly one has to make some choices, and right now, because of the time urgency, I think there's been a decision by that office to try to accelerate the work on the neutron detectors. Obviously, there are possibly other detection systems that may therefore receive somewhat lower priority.
And do you see that as being any kind of an issue going down the road, similar to where we're at right now with the helium-3 issue?
I think, clearly, if one had no budget constraints, it would be nice to do all of these.
Well, we do have budget constraints.
But since we do have budget constraints, we have to make these choices, and this is one choice we've made in response to the current situation.
Okay. Dr. Hagan, I was interested in your statement that DNDO was funding programs to look at alternative neutron detection technology prior to even knowing of the helium-3 shortage. I didn't see any, I guess there's no evidence of this in the documents that we received here in the subcommittee, and just wondering what funding of alternative detection technologies you were engaged in prior to 2008, and if you can tell me about those efforts, their purpose, and the amount that was being spent.
I would have to get back to you on the exact numbers. I wouldn't want, but it's on the order of a few $1 million, starting in probably 07, 08 timeframe.
Okay.
And the research was being done because it was you're always looking for better detectors, and so even though helium-3 was not thought to be in short supply, we tend to do R&D to always make things better, or if not better, cheaper. And so that was the sort of the thrust of it. Of the early research, and it included basically there are two common alternatives to detecting thermal neutrons. Instead of using helium-3, you can usually talk about using lithium-6 or boron-10. And so most of the work that was funded early on, not all of it, there's some other techniques.
But where was that funding coming from, I guess, is what I'm more trying to get at here.
It was from our Transformational and Applied Research Directorate. We had a total funding for that effort back in 06, I believe, was around 70 million, and today it's up around 109. So it's grown with time. And back in
where was this research being done at?
I see. Various places, universities, companies, and laboratories, national laboratories, Los Alamos, Livermore. I don't know. I've got the stuff here, but I don't remember exactly.
Okay. If you could get back to me on that, that would be great. I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
I know it's probably more information than you can really, any of us could keep in our heads. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dalkemper. The chair recognizes Mr. Bilbray for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, with your pleasure, I'd like to yield to the senior member of this panel, Mr. Rollbacher from the great city of Huntington Beach.
Actually, Mr. Rohrbacher's not on this panel, but he's recognized, I think, without objection.
I thought it was a unanimous
He
consent.
meant the senior member of the surfing caucus is what he really meant.
I think he just meant the oldest one here.
That's good.
To be blunt, I want to be nice to him while he's still around.
All right, there you go. The demand that we're talking about for helium-3 is how much per year now? I'm looking at
demand seems to be around 20,000 liters.
20,000 liters, and is that just the United States, or is that worldwide?
That's the U.S. Well, it's pretty much worldwide. It involves cryogenics internationally.
Okay,
for
but
example.
the entire demand for helium-3 worldwide is 20,000 liters. Is that what I'm getting here?
That's roughly right.
Okay, and what is the price per liter?
Well, it's very variable. Let's see. We think it's around between $350 and $400 a liter, but some of my friends out in the world claim that it's higher than that.
Okay, so
but it's certainly not more than 1,000 at this time.
not more than 1,000, not less than 300.
That's right.
All right, got it. And how much does a liter of helium-3 weigh?
Let's see. It's a liter is roughly 1/20th of a mole, so it probably weighs 3 grams divided by 20. So it's what is that?
What is that?
0.06 grams or something like that.
Tell me in pounds. I'm sorry.
It's pounds. Oh my goodness! It's way less than an ounce.
Less than an ounce?
Yeah.
Way less than an ounce?
Quite a bit.
Well, does anyone here have a more accurate figure on that in terms of the weight?
Do that in her head faster than I can at the moment.
Yeah.
Wait.
Ground helium.
What? What is the weight?
A gram of helium-3 is 7 liters.
Yeah, a gram of helium-3, but he wants it in ounces.
Is what now?
A gram is an ounce of several grams, so it's very small.
When you say less than an ounce per liter,
Right. It's a
weight?
gas, after all, right?
a half an ounce or closer to a full?
Oh, it's probably less than around 1/10 of an ounce. I don't know what the number.
A tenth of an ounce?
I think of it in my head.
Okay, so I'm trying to get a grip on.
Yeah, it's very small. But, it's 22.
So a
22
tenth of an ounce would be $1,000.
You're right. It's expensive.
Okay. Now, the reason why I'm trying to get to this is that we do know, and by the way, I've appreciated the testimony talking about the alternatives that we have and recycling and alternative approaches and et cetera, and also the concept of maybe getting this out of natural gas and seeing if we can explore that avenue. But one thing that we haven't talked about today is the possibility of helium-3 from the moon, which
Yes.
is something that has not escaped our international competitors. Now, if we're talking about $1,000 for a tenth of an ounce, and this is in what form at that point? Is it liquid or is
Gas.
it gas at that point?
At room temperature, it's obviously gas. It's only a liquid at extreme low temperatures of few degrees Kelvin. So,
Okay, so it would be in gas form.
Oh, yeah.
So if we actually had some type of system on the moon, you could actually put this into a tank and then transport it. Is that correct?
remember, though, the tank is 20,000 liters, so it's a fairly big tank, and it's a long way. Look, it's a long ways to the moon.
Right, but I'm not thinking about necessarily having the entire supply of helium-3 for the world transported in one moon mission, just like you wouldn't have one coal train providing all of the coal for the United States. It would seem to me that what you have told me would be, we right now have a group of entrepreneurs
Yes.
who are trying to decide what space programs, projects they will invest in that would have a future profit.
Right.
It sounds like to me that might be pencil out.
Well, you could try that. My own guess would be that I would rather generate tritium at some nuclear reactor and convert it into helium-3 than try to go all the way to the moon to get it. But
Well, it depends on what.
welcome them to figure out.
Okay, let me ask you this: what would the cost of that be?
We don't really have an accurate number for that yet. That's where we are. We're working both.
Could that also be up to $1,000
A liter.
a liter?
It could well be. Could well be.
Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that in the world that we live in today, considering that we did go to the moon, all those many decades ago,
You'd like to go to the moon again?
that we might actually have a reason to go back to the moon. if this
wait,
could be done
wait.
successfully.
Well, let's be a little careful here, right? Remember that at $1,000 a liter, that's only $20 million a year for the business. So it's not a very big business.
Mr. Chairman, I think we ought to have a Codell to go check that out, and I want to sign up. So.
You want to go?
And none of us weigh as much as what you'd be bringing back.
So you would say that the demand is actually, when you're looking at the scenario that I'm creating here, that the demand is too low to actually justify some kind of a mission that would cost.
Yeah, but my general impression of mission is $1 billion at least, right? I mean, probably more. That $1 billion is one shuttle flight. And so if you...
Well, that's when the government's doing it. The administration's trying to privatize this now.
hey, more power to them.
Mr. Rohrbacher's time has expired
very
not quite
much.
as gloriously as it used to, but Chair recognizes Mr. Davis for 5 minutes.
Well, we have one of the folks who will testify later that I really wanted to introduce, and so for that reason I will hang around, but I would like to give my time back to you or to any other member of our, on the majority side.
I will accept that time just to ask one question of Dr. Brinkman. You said that the whole supply of helium was complicated by the fact that some was coming from Russia. It seems odd, although we are now trying to develop a better relationship with Russia than we had with the Soviet Union, a subject near and dear to Mr. Rohrbacher's heart. They still are not our exactly BFS. We are kind of natural competitors with Russia, not best friends forever. And it seems odd that we would rely upon Russian supply for something so obviously critical to our national security needs.
But I think they don't. Let's see, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with all this, but I believe they dump their helium-3 onto the market, not through our government.
Okay. And did you have any idea of how much more there was, how much more helium-3 there might be coming from that source? I mean, obviously there was a mistake in not seeing this coming.
Yes.
But it's odd that the supply from Russia did in fact complicate the ability to see this coming quite so much, particularly for something so obviously critical to national security needs.
It's just one of the things that I would not want to claim that was the only driving factor in this crisis at all. Okay. But it was certainly, it's played a role. But,
okay. What's that? Actually, Mr. Rohrbacher used up Mr. Bilbray's time.
And now I will be.
And now you've got your own
Bilbray.
Time. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, I would solicit comment from any one of the doctors for us. I've been in government since I was 25 years old. I was elected April of '76, before Jimmy Carter. That's how long I've been hanging around. And the one thing that's become very obvious to me is those of us in government in our quest to try to stop people from doing wrong, we have legislated ourselves into a position to where so often we stop people from doing good and correcting. My quest to you is that you talk about this ability to, somewhere in the future, build and operate a facility that can then provide the service after. And I remember, we got 12 years. We have to wait for a certain natural process to occur. Do we have any plans? Have we cited? Do we permit? What do we have online right now, Doctor, to be able to move the agenda to build a facility to produce the components that we need to keep the supply flowing?
well, presently, we still have the processing capability that was part of the weapons program. And you could use that for the private purpose of creating helium-3. The issue is, where do you get the helium, the tritium that you could use in that process? The
right.
process is available to us, and so that's the big issue is what the source is, and it's, even in the case of the source, we could go back to irradiating samples in reactors in this country. That's the way it was done in the weapons program, and create the tritium and let it decay. And if they,
My question is, we could go back.
Right.
But where and has it been permitted? Is it legal for these facilities to go back and do that now? Have we made it, is the regulatory process allow them to go back, and have we cited this? Because it's one thing to say we need to do this or we should do it. It's another thing when we sit there and say, yeah, we ought to do it, and come the 11th hour, we block it from getting a permit to go into operation. We've seen that with this issue for the last 30 years.
I do not know of any legal blocking of this. The issue the main issue with this approach is just how much it's going to cost, because it looks like it's expensive.
How many facilities do we have in the country that
But
makes it?
the way the process used to work, we used various reactors to create the tritium, and then everything it was moved to Savannah River, and Savannah River did the processing.
Okay, is this?
Gentleman's time has
you
expired.
very
We do have a second panel, and we probably have votes at 11:30 or so. Dr. Hagan, there seemed to be something you were burning to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to comment that in addition to going back and making more helium-3 through other means, and I also wanted to answer a question from my own congressman, so I live in your district, and I wanted to be able to say that. But these other technologies in the past may not have been as viable because of the cost, but as the cost of helium-3 rises, they become more and more viable. So I think it may be quite likely, in my mind, that the future will lie with these kinds of things, not going back and having to sort of resurrect the helium-3 production through tritium decay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We will now take a short break and have our second panel. Thank you. And I want to obviously thank this panel for your testimony today. Thank you. Yes, I will. Thank you. And we are back. It is now time to introduce our second panel, and I'll begin by recognizing Mr. Davis to recognize or introduce Dr. Woods.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Our good friend John Tanner from West Tennessee had other meetings and could not stay to make the introduction. We certainly welcome you here today and look forward to your testimony and look at the work that you have performed and your impact. Thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to join us today with your testimony. Welcome.
Okay, I'm now pleased to introduce the balance of our panel. Dr. Tom Anderson is the production manager at Reuter-Stokes Radiation Measurement Solutions at GE Energy. Dr. Richard Arsenault, what's that? Mr., you're right. Okay, sorry. Is director of Health, Safety, Security, and Environment at ThruBit LLC. And Dr. William Halperin is the John Evans Professor of Physics at the Northwestern University in Illinois. As all of you should know from having been here before, we do allow 5 minutes for spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record. And after your spoken testimony, each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. It is our practice to take testimony under oath. Do any of you have any objection to taking an oath? The record should reflect that all of the witnesses shook their head to indicate they had no objection to taking an oath. You also have the right to be represented by counsel. Do any of you have counsel here? And the record should reflect that all the witnesses shook their heads that they did not have counsel here. If you would now please stand and raise your right hand, and if anyone in the audience wishes to be sworn in, you may stand as well. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay. The record should reflect that all of the witnesses have now taken the oath. We will start with Mr. Tom Anderson. Mr. Anderson, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Tom Anderson, and I am the product line leader for GE Energy's Reuter-Stokes Radiation Measurement Solutions. I appreciate the opportunity to provide my perspective on the helium-3 shortage. GE Energy's Reuter-Stokes legacy dates back to the early years of the nuclear industry. We manufacture in-core sensors and accurately measure neutron power levels under the extreme temperature and radiation conditions prevalent in boiling water reactors. We also design and manufacture a variety of products that are used in oil and gas exploration, including helium-3 neutron detectors, gamma sensors, and systems to navigate and locate oil and gas reservoirs thousands of feet under the Earth's surface. We also use helium-3 to manufacture neutron detectors for Homeland Security, nuclear safeguards, and neutron scattering research facilities. GE Energy's Reuter-Stokes facility in Twinsburg, Ohio, is the largest manufacturer of helium-3 neutron detectors in the world. In my written testimony, I described in detail the important systems and applications that have come to rely on GE's helium-3 neutron detectors. This morning I want to emphasize 2 points. First, an adequate supply of helium-3 must be made available to support critical applications such as nuclear safeguards and oil exploration while replacement technologies are developed. Second, federal funding is essential to accelerate development of alternate neutron detection technologies. The need to act is critical. The Department of Energy's helium-3 reserves have been depleted to approximately 50,000 liters. To put this in perspective, GE has purchased over 100,000 liters of helium-3 from the DOE since 2003. Since 9/11, GE has manufactured over 40,000 helium-3 detectors which support Homeland Security and nuclear safeguards programs. DNDO and the integrated project team have played a key role in responding to the helium-3 shortage. I believe DNDO is exploring the most practical options available to produce helium-3. Short of planning a trip to the moon, as was discussed this morning, to mine helium-3, the most promising near-term prospect is to accelerate work with the Canadian government to harvest the helium-3 from the tritium storage beds at Ontario Power Generation. Expeditious recovery and processing of this gas could be used to sustain helium-3 detectors for applications such as oil exploration and nuclear safeguards while replacement technologies are developed. As we look for additional supplies, it is critical that the federal government strengthen its support of research and development for alternative technologies. There is currently no drop-in replacement technology, and as many as 6 different technologies may be required to support the neutron detection needs in various applications I just described. GE is well on the way to completing development of a boron-10 neutron detection panel for radiation portals used in Homeland Security. This required considerable investment by GE and will involve significant facility and process modifications. I have personally been involved in over 10 new technology and product development programs during my time at GE. Not all have been successful. If I leave you with one thought today, it would be this. It is one thing to invent a technology to solve a problem, but it is an entirely separate set of challenges that industry faces to then take that science, craft it into a product that is scalable in form, fit, and function, that can operate over the full range of environmental extremes, a product that is reliable with relatively long service life and minimal maintenance requirements, a product which thousands or even tens of thousands can be manufactured at a reasonable cost with quality and consistent performance. The magnitude of these challenges illustrates the need for federal investment. We must develop new technologies and maximize available helium-3 supplies to avoid being caught, again, by surprise. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Arsenault is recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, members of the committee, my name is Richard Arsenault. I'm the Director of Health, Safety, Security, Environment, along with being the Corporate Radiation Safety Officer of ThruBit LLC, which is a Shell Technology Ventures Fund 1 portfolio company formed in 2005. Today we offer logging solutions based on a unique patented ThruBit deployment technique that provides significant advantage in many applications. We're a small company taking this new technology from proof of concept to commercial introduction with aspirations to grow into a much larger company. I've been involved in the oil well logging industry since 1979, starting out as open-hole wireline engineer in West Texas, and later got involved in the development of logging while drilling in 1982. Neutron wells can be Wells can be logged by wireline logging or LWD logging, known as logging while drilling. There are a number of formation measurements that are taken. When a well is logged, neutron logging is one of the primary measurements taken when a well is logged. The neutron measurement provides hydrogen located in the pore space of the formation, and the porosity is determined from neutron count rates, and the detector is within the logging tool. The neutron measurement is a primary gas indicator, which helps delineate gas and oil-producing zones, along with providing porosity of the formation. Both wireline and LWD tools will, in most cases, have a long space, short space helium-3 detector, which are located at different distances from radioactive sources mounted in the logging tool. Helium-3 detectors are used with either americium-241 beryllium or californium-252 radioactive sources. The importance of helium-3 supply to the oil industry is critical. It crosses into numerous sectors of the industry. Helium-3 is used in almost all the entire neutron detectors incorporated in downhole tools in our industry. The neutron count rate measurement, from which the porosity measurement is derived, is used in oil and gas reservoir evaluations. Even small areas of the neutron measurement can make a difference in whether a reservoir is commercially viable or not. Oil and gas exploration within the U.S. is a vital part of our national security and lessens our dependence on foreign and oil and gas. Shortage of helium-3 is starting to impact our entire industry. As rig counts increase, the request for well log increases, which require more tools and the service to be in service ready to go. Large companies can take stockpiles of tools not in service during the slowdown in the last 2 years and put them back in service. Smaller companies, which have less of a stockpile of tools not in service to pull from, are unable to do so. With small companies such as ThruBit trying to increase our market penetration, creates an extra hardship on limiting our ability to grow and bring new technology to the marketplace. Large companies have financial and human resources to pursue extensive research and development and looking to potential alternatives in detector technologies. Smaller companies are not as fortunate. They cannot afford extensive research and development. The commercial viability comes into question along with their ability to sustain their business. These small companies are also in such a way they cannot afford extensive research and development alternatives to the current supply of tools. I want to personally thank you for your opportunity to discuss this important issue involving the oil and gas well service industry today.
Thank you, Mr. Arsenault. Dr. Halperin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify about the negative impact on scientific research caused by the shortage of helium-3. I am a physics professor at Northwestern, and I rely heavily on helium-3 to carry out scientific research at low temperatures. I've been involved in this kind of work since 1970. Low-temperature research is essential for studying properties of materials such as superconductivity, magnetism, and developing various advanced materials. Low-temperature research is also critical to future improvements in metrology and high-speed computation, including quantum information technology. Shortages of helium-3 driven by increased Homeland Security demands and decreased production capability are already creating major difficulties in these areas of research. So let me briefly summarize the salient points. From 2001 to the present, the stocks of about 230,000 liters have been drawn down at a rate far in excess of today's global production, estimated to be approximately 20,000 liters per year. The use of helium-3 as a detector of radioactive materials at ports, airports, and border crossings, combined with the growth of medical, commercial, and scientific applications, is responsible for this extraordinary increase in demand. Now, absent new production sources, it is now impossible to serve the estimated need of 70,000 liters per year. It may be possible to find alternatives to the use of helium-3 for some applications, but for others, the unique physical properties of helium-3 are essential. Scientific research at low temperatures is the signature example of an area in which helium-3 is irreplaceable. Without adequate supplies, such research will cease entirely. To put the matter into context, I note that 12 Nobel laureates in physics in the past 25 years owe their accomplishments in some important measure to the availability of helium-3. Cases in which substitutes might be found for helium-3 include neutron detection at facilities such as the Spallation Neutron Source at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, oil and gas well evaluation, building construction technology, and the improvement of lasers. The issue perhaps is best illustrated by a personal experience. In October of 2008, I sought information about availability and pricing from 6 well-known distributors of helium-3 gas. Only ChemGas and SpectraGas had any supply, but their prices were extraordinarily high, of the order of $2,000 a liter, 5 to 10 times higher than I had expected, and well outside of my research budget. The following summer, I received more bad news. Oxford Instruments, the largest supplier of low-temperature refrigerators, contacted me to say that the company could not obtain any helium-3 from their supplier, SpectraGas. Discussions among attendees at a subsequent international low-temperature physics conference revealed that this shortage was global. Although the shortage took many of us by surprise, I later learned that some government officials had been aware of this problem for some time but had not shared that information. In the fall of 2009, Nobel laureates Doug Osheroff and Bob Richardson, on behalf of a low-temperature working group of which I was a member, wrote to Bill Brinkman, director of the Department of Energy's Office of Science, to express concern about this shortage of helium-3 for low-temperature research. Conversations with DOE ensued, but to date, requests by scientists and refrigerator companies often go unanswered or unmet, and young scientists are especially vulnerable. Many of us are concerned that cryogenic instrumentation companies may soon be forced out of business. Janus Research is an example. Janus has been guaranteed an allocation, but helium has not been delivered, and sales interruptions place the company at risk. Should Janus and other companies stop providing refrigerators, low-temperature science will end. Dr. Brinkman requested that our working group assess the critical needs in low-temperature science. So I conducted a survey with the following principal findings. In a 10-year interval, from 1999 to 2009, the purchase of helium-3 for low-temperature science averaged 3,500 liters per year and was growing at approximately 12% per year worldwide. The details are in my written testimony. Now, on a personal note, I have an immediate need in my laboratory for 20 liters of helium-3. SpectraGas, the sole provider of helium-3 released by the Department of Energy, has not responded in the 5 months since I made my request, and my National Science Foundation support is now in jeopardy. In conclusion, we must recognize the diversity of needs for helium-3 and adopt the following strategies. Explore alternative technologies. Establish effective communication among all the stakeholders. Implement recycling and conservation. Redesign critical need instrumentation to be more efficient. And finally, develop new sources of helium-3. I would be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Halperin. Dr. Woods for 5 minutes.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, members of the subcommittee, I'm honored to be asked to testify today. My name is Dr. Jason Woods. I'm Assistant Professor of Radiology, Physics, and Molecular Biophysics at Washington University, where I'm also Assistant Dean of Arts and Sciences. And within the International Society for Magnetic Resonance in Medicine, I'm the Program Director for our Hyperpolarized Media Study Group. I've been involved with helium-3 magnetic resonance imaging since 1997. My education and background are in nuclear spin physics, helium-3 MRI, and the use of imaging for pulmonary physiology and pathophysiology. My research is focused on the use of helium-3 as a diagnostic imaging tool to precisely quantify lung ventilation, lung microstructure, and to guide new interventions that are being developed. In my testimony, I attempt to represent the field of helium-3 MRI and the impact of the shortage on our field. Now, if we ask seasoned pulmonologists how much their field has changed in 25 years, responses will be that largely not much has changed. There's the same technology for measuring pulmonary function. There are largely the same treatments. There are a few new drugs available, but not much has changed. And these people see a large number of patients. Approximately 35 million Americans suffer from obstructive lung disease, that's asthma and COPD together, and taken together, so there's 35 million Americans. COPD alone is the 4th leading cause of death and the only major leading cause of death in the U.S. and in the world that is significantly rising. Helium-3 MRI is beginning to emerge as a new gold standard biomarker for measuring pulmonary function and structure. Its high signal creates extraordinarily detailed images of lung ventilation, which I've shown you right here, healthy patient and a couple of volunteers with asthma and COPD. And its physical properties allow the determination of microstructure at the alveolar level. So here I've shown you a couple of images which are maps of lung microstructure, again, at the alveolar level. So this kind of sensitivity to lung structure and function and the ability to get regional maps of lung microstructure are allowing us to basically lead a renaissance in pulmonary medicine. And I think that in the next 10 years, we're going to see significant advances within this field. Lack of helium-3 gas will stifle these advances. Now, to be clear, the shortage affects my research acutely, and without any gas, my research as a young professor would be completely shut down, and I would likely join the ranks of the unemployed. But I think the larger impact of helium-3 MRI is on much easier determination of the effectiveness of new drugs and devices and in guiding new minimally invasive interventions, which is my most recent work. The lack of big leaps forward in drugs and devices in pulmonary medicine over the last 10 and 20 years is largely due to the combination of two things: the exceptional cost to bring a drug to market or device to market, and the lack of a precise biomarker to determine changes in lung function and structure. And one recent example illustrates this well. In 2007, GlaxoSmithKline released results of a study entitled Toward a Revolution in COPD Health, or TORCH. The total cost of the study was $500 million for 6,000 patients with moderate and severe COPD. And in this case, the endpoint was final. It was death from all causes. It ranged from a high of 16% to a low of 12.6%. And they wanted to answer the question, does Advair reduce mortality by as much as 20%? And unfortunately for GSK, the question remained entirely unanswered because there was a 5.2% chance that the difference between the groups occurred randomly, and the maximum accepted value is 5%. So by my calculation, if we had used helium-3 diffusion MRI that our group has developed as a biomarker and as an endpoint, then 6,000 patients would have turned into approximately 500 patients, and the $500 million study would have turned into a $50 million study, saving $450 million, and the question of efficacy would likely have been answered. And this is just one example of the significant impact that I think that helium-3 MRI will have. I firmly believe that helium that we use is 100% recyclable, and we can begin to do this in the next few years with a commercially viable recycling scheme. And from my perspective, the most important thing that I want to communicate to you today is that without approximately 2,000 liters of helium-3 for our imaging community per year, we will basically curtail this revolution in pulmonary medicine, which is currently in progress.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. I now recognize myself for first round of questions. All of you have described your uses for helium-3. All of you obviously have relied upon technologies or have helped used or developed technologies that assumed the availability of helium-3. The only domestic supplier was the Department of Energy. Were any of you advised by the Department of Energy, by DOE, of any future shortage of Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, we'd had discussions with the isotope office who was distributing helium-3 through the years, going back to the first auction back in the 2003 timeframe, and we were not aware of any shortages. At the time, we were under the impression that to understand exactly how much helium-3 was available might be, sensitive information because of the nature of the generation of it.
Right. Anyone, Mr. Arsenault?
No, we were not notified. We've been relying on our vendors to let us know if there's any supply problems.
Okay. Anyone else? Dr. Halperin?
Yes. In the case of cryogenics, 8 months ago, no one speaking on behalf of that entire community summarized at a recent conference. There was no knowledge other than anecdotal from the marketplace, nothing from the DOE specifically, and to the present date, nothing from the DOE.
Okay. Dr. Woods?
No, we were not notified by DOE. Our information came directly from the marketplace.
Okay. Dr. Brinkman, we've heard that probably the current use of helium-3 that is going to be the hardest to find a substitute for is cryogenics. Is there any substitute in your work in cryogenics? I'm sorry, Dr. Halperin is what I meant to say.
There is absolutely no substitute. The reason is that it depends on the very interesting physical properties of helium-3. Below 1 degree Kelvin, the range of materials and applications below the temperature of 1 degree Kelvin are not accessible unless you use refrigerators that depend on helium-3 and use helium-3.
Okay. I'm assuming that none of you are in a position to manufacture tritium or really to engage in any kind of research for alternatives. Do you have a sense of whether there should be research into manufacturing helium-3 if there is no substitute, or finding alternatives, whether that is something that should be funded by some agency of the government? Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, we have responded to a request for information from the Department of Nuclear, the DNDO, with regard to processing helium-3 from natural gas. So we have looked at it. We do have an organization within GE that has a capability to explore that.
Okay. Anyone else? We can go down and have Mr. Arsenault.
We're a small company, 70 employees, so we don't have a very large R&D group, so we cannot pursue that. We have to use detectors, incorporate them in our tools. Our tools are 2 1/8, the smallest in the industry, so we have limited geometry. So we have to rely on technology that is existing to use it, and it's used throughout the whole industry.
Dr. Halperin?
Yes, I just mentioned that it turns out in cryogenics there isn't an alternative based on quantum mechanics, but the agencies could help extensively by supporting communication among all of those who are involved, such that planning at the base level as well as in the agencies can take place, and this does not exist at the present time. And furthermore, the agencies, meaning the research agencies, could help significantly in recycling and conservation or funding suggestions for recycling and conservation.
Okay. Dr. Woods, you may answer. You're not required to answer.
Well, Chairman Miller, thank you. By my estimation, approximately 30% of the studies that are currently underway with helium-3 may be replaced with xenon-129, but that technology is still under development, and some grants from the NIH or from NSF for development of xenon-129 would facilitate the transition of some of those studies to xenon-129.
Chair now recognizes Dr. Brown for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, in your testimony you state that, quote, federal research funding is essential to supplement private sector efforts to accelerate development of replacement technologies, unquote. Why is federal R&D essential when there is a clear and sizable market demand ready to pay for alternative technologies?
It's a fairly significant endeavor to research these products. The first one, the Boron 10 solution we're working on today, is come at quite a significant cost to GE, and there is a fairly large market there. But as you start looking at the neutron scattering applications, the oil and gas applications, and the nuclear safeguards applications, the technology development there is going to be very, very significant. I don't even know at this point what that's going to involve. And then again, to commercialize that into a product that can be fielded is going to be very significant. So without funding, we'll do what we can do, but it would certainly help accelerate our development programs.
But in the private sector, isn't this part of the cost of development? Why can't it be rolled into the cost of just doing business? Just roll into the cost of what you're doing.
Again, we have to look at the cost benefit when we decide to engage in those programs. And for instance, the nuclear safeguards program, although it's incredibly important, is still a relatively small program.
All right, sir. Dr. Woods, in order to mitigate demand for helium-3, guidance was issued to no longer allocate helium-3 for purposes that would lead to further increases in helium-3 demand. As a physician, I certainly appreciate the research that you're doing and treated a lot of patients with COPD and asthma and other things that you're trying to find us some better diagnostic as well as treatment modalities. The use of helium-3 for lung imaging was just beginning to take off. What would happen if helium-3 became so effective for medical purposes that demand increased?
Clearly, if helium-3 were used as a routine diagnostic imaging tool in the clinic, then the total demand for helium-3 within the medical imaging community would increase. My opinion is that the technology is more likely to be used in efficacy testing and in saving money for bringing drugs and devices to market, and then in guiding interventions. And so by my estimate, our community can probably survive on approximately 2,000 liters per year, given that we would recycle 100% of the helium that's inhaled.
So you're saying that you don't foresee an increase in demand above that level, the 2,000 liters, at this point. Is that correct?
At this point, I do not foresee that increase.
Okay, so if you had that amount of supply, then through recycling efforts, then it could be reutilized and recycled, and that you wouldn't need any further increase in the supply of helium-3, as far as what you know right now. Is that correct?
Correct, assuming that we had the approximately 2,000 liters per year.
Okay, so if you were supplied that demand, we would need not be searching for alternatives, but you don't have that demand. Is that correct?
Correct.
I mean, you don't have that demand met. So should we be seeking alternatives at this point?
I think that we should be seeking alternatives in the same way that they were always seeking alternatives for for diagnostic imaging. The main alternative, the only alternative, is xenon-129, and I see it as an alternative in only 30, 40, 50% of the studies that we can perform, and that's mainly ventilation.
Okay, and how about negative impacts of xenon?
They exist. Xenon has an anesthetic effect, and so you have to limit the dose. I don't think that that's going to be a significant impediment to breathing in xenon, and the fact that xenon absorbs in human tissue can be used to advantage in certain scenarios.
All right, Mr. Chairman, my time's up, and I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Ms. Dowkemper is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, you testified that there's no, no drop-in replacement technology for helium-3 detectors. And what application do you think replacement is the easiest, and which areas are most difficult?
Certainly the easiest is the radiation portal monitors, and that's because you have a lot of space, and the measurement requirements are, you're just trying to detect whether neutrons are there. As far as the most difficult, that's going to be very difficult. It's going to come somewhere between, I believe, between oil and gas potentially and neutron scattering. For oil and gas, you have very high temperatures, very high shock conditions, and you have to have a very good ability to detect the neutron signal. And for neutron scattering, you have to be able to do timing. You have to be able to do very precise location of where those neutrons scattered into the array so that you can get the scientific measurements that are needed.
I also wanted to ask you a little bit about the Russian supplies. And we were told yesterday that the Japanese neutron scattering facilities intend to obtain their future helium-3 needs from Russia. Is this a reliable long-term source in your opinion?
The information that I have is that there's somewhere on the order of 8 or 10,000 liters per year coming out of Russia. The information is very sketchy, though, because there's a certain amount of it that becomes available on the open market, and that's kind of a historical perspective on what's been released. I don't know what will be released in the future. And the other thing I don't know is how much of it is actually being used within the former Soviet Union countries at this point.
Mr. Arsenault, can helium-3 be recycled from the old tools?
Yes, if the tube isn't tacky, it can be sent back and they can harvest the helium-3. The life expectancy and the downhole conditions that we're running at, you've got about a life expectancy of about 5 years, and they have to be replaced.
So they can be recycled, but
It can be recycled, but if you're increasing your tool build, you got to have increased supply of those tubes.
Okay. I'm from Pennsylvania, so I'm assuming this will be used in the Marcellus Shale.
Marcellus Shale, which is very active right now.
Right, exactly. Dr. Halperin, I have a question for you. We've been informed by the White House sources that helium-3 for research purposes has been provided to Spectra Gas and is being purified for release in May. Has this been conveyed to you? Are you aware of this?
Yes. However, the schedule that has been established by Spectra Gas is that you sign up in a queue. That's a one-way street. That is to say, no information back. Occasionally there are releases. We know that from Spectra Gas. So there have been some deliveries. Leiden Cryogenics has received 100 liters or so. But the majority of those who are users, including other cryogenic instrumentation suppliers, including also Leiden Cryogenics, do not have any word back as to whether the helium-3 gas will be provided even when they're in the queue. So this is, for a period of 6 months, this is a very difficult situation, particularly for junior faculty starting their research careers.
So you have no idea if you'll be receiving your supplies?
No idea, no information, no status.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Rohrbacher for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, let me begin by suggesting, Mr. Chairman, that you are to be complimented as soon as he gets done getting it from Dr. Brown. Mr. Chairman, you are to be complimented for bringing this hearing today and bringing forth a great panel of witnesses and discussing an issue that may be obscure to a lot of people, but obviously has tremendous implications. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting this together today. About the oil and gas, how much do you use of this helium-3? How much does the oil and gas industry use?
I don't have an exact amount how much is used. A manufacturer would have to provide that, but every neutron logging tool has 2 detectors, and you've got several small companies and 4 very large companies that provide this service around the world, not only in the U.S. So it's a very large fleet of tools that are being used. Manufacturer would have to provide the number of tubes that are being sold and what volume of gas is being in each tube. But I believe it's about less than a liter per tube, if I remember right.
Okay, now you say a liter per tube. We're saying about per time you drill?
Well, no, each detector is approximately a liter of helium-3 per tube, as I recall. Each tool would have 2 detectors. And typically when you go out to a well, you'll have two tool strings that you bring to a well. So you've got 2 tools, which means you've got 4 detectors per job.
So
on those
you're
tools.
using at least 4 liters per job?
Yeah, and the average life expectancy, we're running at 300-plus degrees, harsh downhole condition, a lot of shock and vibration. So the best life you're typically getting out of them is about 5 years, and they have to be swapped out.
Okay, so we're talking about and nationally and internationally. That's
yeah, it's nationally and internationally.
It is a very significant product to the production of
Yes.
of energy.
Yes.
And shale oil in particular, is that what you're
Well,
involved in?
Marcellus Shale is very active right now in drilling. There's a lot of drilling going up there. There's a lot of shale plays throughout the U.S. that are very active right now.
Okay.
If they open up the Atlantic, Continental Shelf, Eastern Gulf, you will see a
We
very...
got him. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about more and more. Now, already we've noted that Dr. Halperin said that he was buying it at $2,000 a liter. Now, I'd like to go back to my questions on from the last panel. I think Mr. Chairman, I think the cost factor that we've been given is dramatically lower than the reality of what it costs to produce this material and the value of the material. The fact is that the $1,000 a liter may be based on what it costs right now, meaning if they were trying to say how much does it cost to take natural gas out of a landfill, and all they did was calculate the cost of putting the tubes down and the natural gas that's coming up, well, that doesn't take into account the cost of filling the landfill, all the trucks necessary to produce the landfill, all the digging that made the landfill in itself. What we're talking about is something which is a lot more expensive if we're just taking a look at the cost of actually producing this than $1,000 a liter. I would suggest, and especially as the demand goes up, and Dr. Woods is suggesting to us that the demand, if we are going to save money and we are going to do a job that's necessary to make our health care, you cited one study where the cost went from $500 million to $50 million, that we have got a huge market for this product, and yet we are going through a shortage. Now, I would suggest, and I know that everybody would like to not make light of this, but I have read many people in the field of space transportation suggest that we may have a market here. If you're talking about not $1,000 a liter, but $3,000 or $4,000 a liter, or even less than a liter of what we're talking about, this may well provide the incentive for the type of private sector effort on the moon that would be necessary. Now, I'm not saying that we can do that for today. In the meantime, we've heard a lot of good evidence today and testimony about recycling and other alternatives and some of the things other suggestions that have been right on target. But I don't think we should leave out the potential that space-based assets can be brought to use here on our planet for the very things that we've heard about through testimony today. And I know Dr. Halperin is doing wonderful work for the benefit of humankind, as is in Dr. Woods. And I think that providing energy is certainly an important element to prosperity and a good life for our people. And we have private sector companies trying to do that job. So thank you very much again, Mr. Chairman. You've given us a very good perspective on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Warbacher, for only exceeding your time by 25 seconds, a new record for Mr. Warbacher. I think the IAEA might have something to say about it if we allowed commercial manufacturing of tritium. But certainly the need is very much there. We don't really have time for a second round, but without objection, I do have a couple of questions without having an entire second round of questions. Mr. Anderson, you said you are recycling helium-3. Can you tell us how much you've been able to recycle, and do you have a source of recycled helium-3, and if so, from whom are you getting it, and how much are you getting of recycled helium-3?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do recycle helium-3, and it comes from a number of different places. In some cases, it would be a customer that may have some detectors that they're not using that would send in. We'd recover the gas and build a new detector for them to the design that they need. Other than that, there's a lot of detectors that are in inactive systems out at the national laboratories and several different places, and we bring those in and recover the gas from those detectors. Also, some of the oil and gas companies have started sending in detectors to recover the gas. And we've recovered well over 1,000 liters at this point. It's a fairly significant amount of gas that's out there that's not being used.
Okay. And you spoke also of identifying substitutes. Do you have any idea at all where we can what we can substitute, when those substitutes will be available in a sufficient quantity to make a difference?
Well, for Homeland Security in the portal area, I think that substitute will come fairly quickly, which is very important because it's the largest consumer and it's a very, very important application to protect our borders. Secondly, possibly some of the smaller Homeland Security instruments, because again, you're just doing basic counting, will probably be relatively straightforward. I think it's going to become more difficult, much more difficult, when we start getting into oil and gas, neutron scattering, and nuclear safeguards types instruments, because those are performing very specific functions.
Okay. Thank you. So before we bring this hearing to a close, I want to thank all of our witnesses, this panel and the previous panel, who I've already thanked. The record will remain open, as it usually does, for 2 weeks for members to submit any additional statements, and also remain open for answers to any follow-up questions from the subcommittee to any of the witnesses. And somewhat unusually, in consultation with Dr. Brown, we are leaving the record open until the end of days for the production of documents from the agencies that we have requested. We will pursue that and assure that we receive the documents to which Congress is entitled based upon a long history on the topic. So thank you all for appearing, and the hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good job.